Welcome to Municipal Affairs Calgary Votes 2025. Today we're diving back into Calgary's vibrant and evolving political landscape as the race for the next Calgary Municipal Council gains momentum. Among the candidates vying for the coveted role of Calgary's mayor is Brian Thiessen. As a former chair of the Calgary Police Commission, he has demonstrated unwavering dedication to enhancing public safety, fostering community trust, and ensuring accountability in law enforcement. With a vision for an inclusive and prosperous future, Brian is determined to address Calgary's housing challenges, critical infrastructure needs, and economic diversification, ensuring that the city continues to thrive as a global leader in innovation and quality of life. Thiessen, along with his run for mayor, is leading a slate of candidates under the banner the Calgary Party. Are you passionate about local governance and municipal issues? Do you believe in the power of community-driven conversations? Then join us at the Cross Border Network, where we bring together voices from across Canada to shine a spotlight on the challenges and the triumphs of our municipalities. But we need your support to keep the conversation going. Visit crossborderinterviews.ca today to show your support by backing the show monthly or making a one-time annual donation. Your contribution will help us grow and expand our reach, bringing important stories to even more listeners across the nation. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can amplify the voices of local communities. Together, we can shape a brighter future for all. Cross Border Network, where local matters and your support counts. Visit us today at crossborderinterviews.ca. Brian, thank you so much for sitting down with me this morning and talking about yourself and talking about your run to be Calgary's next mayor. And I want to start there, if you don't mind, and ask you basically a simple question. Why did you decide to put your name forward to be Calgary's next mayor?
Well, first of all, nice to see you, Chris. Thanks for having me on the show. I will say the simple answer is public service. I've wanted to engage in public service. I've reached an age and stage in life where you make a decision whether you want to continue the way you're going or give back. And I decided that after talking with my family, I've always wanted to give back to my community. I've scratched that itch in a number of ways, serving on boards like Ronald McDonald House and the Police Commission. But I decided I would like to give back in elected office. So I'm putting my name forward. I'm excited. I think I have a lot of skills that I can offer. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about all the ideas I have for Calgary as well.
So why now? Because you could have waited 4 more years. You could have done it in 2021. What is going on in 2024 as of recording this? But you're going to be the next mayor potentially in 2025. What's going on now that made you think Brian's time is now and Brian's vision for what Calgary can be or what Calgary should be now?
Yeah, listen, I think there's a number of critical issues facing the city, from downtown safety and public safety to transit infrastructure, housing, and, frankly, getting the small things right. We saw how failed city councils and a failure to inspect resulted in a catastrophic water main failure this summer. But most of all, I look at this council. Let's face it, Chris, it's highly dysfunctional. It's the least popular council that we've seen in Calgary's history. People, I think, are ready for a change. And, when I spend my career working with national corporations, not-for-profits, even advising municipalities in Alberta when they have crisis, when they're in crisis, and guiding them through a strategy to recover. So this is my day job. And when I tell my clients that I'm throwing my hat in the ring, aside from being a little bit shocked, they say, oh, thank God, we need something different. What's going on isn't working. The options are not attractive, and people would like to try something different. And I think that I have the skills to help the city that's in crisis to bring together council that's dysfunctional. And one of the ways I'm doing that is I'm going to run as a team. So, we've created the first municipal political party. And so Calgarians can look at, I didn't invent the idea. The provincial government decided over the objection of Albertans to introduce political parties. But when I looked at it with my team, we said, glasses half full. What good can you do with municipal political parties? And one of them is create a platform, run on it, be held accountable to it, just like the province and the feds. And so, and the beauty of it is, my team, we're going to run a full slate in every ward in Calgary. I've got about 10 that are already meeting and working together. We've spent 6 months regularly meeting, talking about our policies. We are a team. Before we get elected, we have strengths in certain areas, and we tap into those. I think that's a real advantage. I can tap into the expertise of my team as well as myself, and I think we can really promise Calgarians. And unlike all of the other people who are running for mayor, I can actually promise to get it done if Calgarians elect a majority of my council members.
But isn't that the key factor there? And we'll talk about the Calgary Party, which is the party that you are representing and you're leading into the next general election. Dysfunction happens when partisan politics gets involved in any level of government. We're seeing it play out federally, we're seeing it play out provincially. The only way that you can get things done is if the majority of your candidates win in this upcoming 2025 election. Hypothetically, if that doesn't happen, we could see a dysfunctional council as well. So, how do you build bridges with other party members after that election if your party doesn't win a majority of the 15 seats on council?
Well, listen, I don't think that's a difficult thing to do. It was done in every city council prior to this one, right? So, listen, I've met with former mayors. I would say, Mayor Aldur and Mayor Bronconnier did a fantastic job of sitting down with council members. And when I asked people how they did it, it's pretty basic. They walked around to their fellow councilors' offices. They listened to what they had to say. They collaborated. I'm a professional negotiator, and I'm very collaborative. And when I look at, people mistake collaboration with concession. When I sit down with adversaries on a matter, I always put myself in their shoes. What do they need from this situation? What are their priorities? And I always think about, how do I deliver on some of those priorities as we come to a collaborative solution? So I work, keep in mind, when I'm doing the engaging in collaboration and difficult negotiations, bet the farm negotiations for organizations, they're about as acrimonious as they can get, right? So I'm the person that comes in when, senior executives have been accused of fraud, sexual harassment. I advise a board of directors in that situation. Not a lot of room with opposing counsel for feel good. But I always sit down with them and say, what is it you need in this situation? What are you looking to get? I put myself in their shoes, and 99% of the time we come to an amicable resolution. So I don't say it out of a sense of naivete. I say it out of real practical world experience, 30 years practicing for all of the major companies downtown. We all do it every day. Companies negotiate mergers between, Suncor and Petrochem, which I worked on, CNOOC and Nexen, the most difficult, complete clashes of cultures, and we come to a resolution. I'm pretty sure that I can sit down with Dan McLean, have a beer, and hammer out a deal on housing.
Good to hear. Can you tell me what about who is the Calgary Party? In your words, what is the Calgary Party? Because you are the first, I want to say, official party that has candidates running. There was a party that announced prior to you, but you are the first one to come out, name some candidates, and you are basically actively recruiting candidates. So who is the Calgary Party?
Yeah, so first of all, no small thing, right? We had to sign up 1,000 members. We had to have 6 candidates in order to register. So, it demonstrates a real momentum. We've attracted a lot of people. Listen, the Calgary Party is a group, an amalgam of people from across the political spectrum. People from center left to center right feel very comfortable in the Calgary Party. We're progressive in the sense that we believe in protecting key rights of citizens. But we're, fiscally responsible. We've got to get our budget balanced. Our number one first exercise was a budget exercise consultation online where we're listening to Calgarians about what their budget priorities are. So we're a centrist option for Calgarians. And when I say that, not a left-leaning candidate that says they're in the center or a right-leaning candidate that, come election time says they're in the center. I spent years of my life working on a centrist provincial option with the Alberta Party. I am a dedicated centrist. And the reason for that, Chris, is I fundamentally believe, as does the Calgary Party, that good ideas come from across the political spectrum.
Is there a
Even though
place, sorry, is there a place for centrist politics in today's society? Because we see so opposing factors in our world today that the centrists seem to be sort of tuned out. How do you break through in that sort of hyperbolic partisan era that we live in with a
you
centrist
know,
party?
I'm fundamentally convinced, Chris, that it's the politicians that have it wrong, and the citizens that have it right. When I look at it, every day when we work, whether it's with a charity or a business, we all sit down, a group of individuals from across the political spectrum, and we work for the best interest of our not-for-profit, our company, our law firm. I do it every day, and so does everyone else. The hundreds of thousands of people that work downtown or in the communities for their community association. I believe we're all centrists. I believe that we constantly take good ideas across the spectrum and help our organizations, our communities, our churches succeed. And so I think it's politics that has it backwards. I think they're trying to divide us. I know it plays well. I know to be on the extremes, but I actually think there's an incredible amount of room for the center. I say majority of Calgarians exist in the center every day.
I appreciate your answer on that. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I've got to ask the sort of follow up to any partisan party politics question, and that is, if you do win and your party does win a majority of votes, will your party councillors be whipped on voting on certain issues that align with the party values rather than the ward values?
Absolutely not. I have promised each of the councillor candidates that have agreed to run with the Calgary Party, there will be no whip. What I've said to them is we're going to come out with four main platform ideas, which we've all agreed on. From downtown safety, housing, transit, and for lack of a better phrase, do the small things right, critical infrastructure, potholes. That's our focus. On those issues, we're going to lay out those for Calgarians. I'm not going to whip. The citizens of Calgary are. They're going to hold us accountable for what we promised and whether we deliver on it. And so, if they want to get up in council and vote against one of the main four platform ideas that we promised their ward constituents that we would deliver on, then they will be, like any other councillor, accountable to the citizens come the next election. So no, I don't see it. Listen, it is a opportunity for a group of people to work together, come to agreement, and function as a team. And that's it. And honestly, Chris, depending on the next provincial election, if the NDP win that election, there won't be political parties anymore. So really, it's not a dynasty. We're not creating some kind of long-term ideological machine. We're learning how to work together as a team and function effectively for the benefit of Calgarians.
On your website, the Calgary Party website, which is the links in the show note for more people who want to learn more about the party. You talk about going back to the basics of what municipal governments should do: snow removal, potholes, critical infrastructure, water, which is completely understandable. What is priority number one for yourself in addressing the challenges that Calgary faces in 2024, 2025?
Well, I think downtown safety, public safety, and housing are number one and two. And I'm not sure, both are. I would say both are number one, to be frank. And so, getting the small things right, potholes, that's absolutely essential. So let's take it in order. I think first you start with getting back to business, right? Making sure. Listen, when you look at potholes, for example, when I talk to the city workers, I understand there's now 2 city workers in each of the quadrants of the city that are responsible for potholes. So that sounds like pushing a rock uphill for life, right? We will never solve potholes with that amount of people working on potholes. 2 people in the Northwest is not going to fix potholes. So let's get back to that. More importantly, a much more tricky issue, critical infrastructure. When you look at what happened this summer with the water main break, what disturbed me was this council and previous councils didn't use the money that was given to them to inspect pipe and make sure that it was functioning effectively and invest in rehabilitating that pipe. So that's a failure. And looking forward, you can look at other examples around the world. There are cities in the US that have been spending 20 years replacing similar steel, concrete reinforced steel pipe. It's about a $255 million project, which hasn't been budgeted for by this council or previous councils. So we have to start there. If you use a house analogy, the roof's failing. We got to fix the roof. So we got to get back and fix that. And when council city admin and council were answering on the water main, we discovered that there was a huge amount of seepage. So basically water leaking out of the pipe, and that they weren't able to inspect the pipe because it's very difficult to inspect pipes with water flowing through. Well, I have news for this council. We have the highest concentration of pipeline experts in the world in downtown Calgary. And they are responsible for thousands of kilometers of pipe over some of the most difficult terrain in the world. And if they have seepage of over like 0.1%, they're shut down. So they do it. They inspect in crude oil pipelines every day. And there's all the expertise that we need to tap into in this city to make sure that we aren't losing the water that's going through the pipe, that we're doing a proper regular inspection. And we need to get that right yesterday. Then we need to move to how are we budgeting for replacing $250 million of pipe, twinning it, making sure that we have a plan in place. And that's a multi-decade plan. And I'm all for city building, but probably you don't pay for an arena, spend $1.2 billion on an arena without thinking about the $255 million you have to ensure that people have water every day. So I think you have to budget in a more sophisticated manner, not linearly. Do I have the money in my bank account today? But as most sophisticated organizations do, you think about all your priorities. You plan it out for multiple year cycles, and you ensure that you have the money set aside to invest in it and address the infrastructure deficit.
So using your analogy of the house here for a second,
Yeah.
if your roof is broken as a family, as someone who owns a house, if something goes wrong in the house, you have to cut somewhere else to make up that money. So where do you see the city currently gone wrong in addressing this issue and spending where they should have been spending on this critical infrastructure, potential repair and replacement? Because we only have a limited supply of money. And unless the city council of your term decides to raise taxes 10% every year, the money is what we have right now. So where do you see this current council diverting from its responsibilities? And how do you see addressing that with the money we currently have without raising taxes 20% or 10%?
Well, I'll use a real easy, concrete example. And again, I'm all for city building projects, but let's look at this council. There was an arena deal in place, and that arena deal, whoever negotiated, I know former Councillor Davison claims credit for it. So let's say he negotiated it. Well, he messed up because he gave a contractual out. right? So you don't have a deal if one of the parties can get out of the deal. So they screwed up by providing an out. Then you had Councillor Sharp, who took over and headed up the negotiation for the city uh, against what is known to be one of the best negotiators in the world in Murray Edwards, and absolutely was fed their lunch on that. So that when the Calgary Flames broke that initial deal, they were talking about a $10 to $20 million deal from the province for curbs and infrastructure. And the province and the city handed the Calgary Flames $600 million of Calgarians' taxpayer money twice. And when the city says, no problem, some of that money is coming from the province, that's our money. They gave our money away twice. So Councillor Sharp gave away $600 million in a $1.2 billion deal, and now is in front of council saying, I don't understand why we have to close the Inglewood pool. Well, let me tell you this. If this council had not given away $600 million, we could replace every community pool and community center in the city. So it matters. If you spend money frivolously, using our housing analogy, you don't have the money for the roof, now you're in trouble, right? And that's what this council has done. So spend responsibly. You cannot, as a city council, go to Calgarians and demand property tax increases if your house is not in order. And they have no credibility with Calgarians because they gave away the farm before they began.
Wow, big words. And I hate to ask the stupid question, but it sounds like you're laying the blame on Councillor Sharp for the Serena deal and not Mayor Gondek. Is that the right thing? Because Mayor Gondek is the mayor and she's the leader of this council.
I think there's plenty of room for blame to go around, but Councillor Sharp headed up the committee that negotiated the deal. And by the way, I encourage you to Google her interview right after she negotiated that deal, where she was asked questions about the deal and didn't understand the details of that very deal she had just negotiated. And let me tell you one thing, Murray Edwards understood the deal. He didn't have to be briefed by anyone if he had gone in front of the media, which he didn't do. But yes, the mayor also holds responsibility. That's the chair of the board. The mayor didn't guide them. She showed up in a Flames jersey during a provincial election to stand behind the premier and take credit and for the deal. So she absolutely owns that deal as well. She's the head of city council.
Perfect. I want to turn to a topic that you're well acquainted with as the former chair of the Calgary Police Commission, and that is crime. There's been a lot of talk over the last, I'd say, 5 years, probably even 8 years, about crime in the city skyrocketing and going up. It's been exacerbated by a lot of external factors, but it is on the rise. How do you get back to the basics of patrolling and ensuring that we have a safe community in Calgary under a Thiessen mayoral ship?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that because that is one of our number one priorities. And so, first of all, the good news is there was a downtown safety table, and they had all the experts in Calgary to talk about public safety, and they came out with a list of recommendations. So that work has been done. So the good news is we don't have to start with a study. The bad news is this city council hasn't implemented any of them. So let's start with as I have approached this. First of all, I start with 4 years experience as chair of the Calgary Police Commission. I worked on the committee that hired this police chief. I have a relationship with Calgary Police Service, and I understand where they're coming from on the issue. And I can tell you this, they will tell you, you cannot police your way out of the situation. So people who say, let's just fund the police and get out of their way, that's naive. And the police will tell you that's naive. So you don't start there. You start with the recommendations of the Downtown Safety Council. And that was a actual downtown police station integrated with 24/7 community outreach teams. And what that looks like, and I've talked to, there's over 80 organizations that are providing mental health and addiction supports in downtown Calgary. And I've sat down and talked with a bunch of them. And what they all say is, Alpha House does a great job. They have safety teams, help teams that are integrated with Calgary Transit and Calgary Police, both patrolling downtown and on transit. And the difference in response is remarkable. Transit police will tell you if they approach individuals in uniform, they run. If they approach in the help team vests, people come to them and ask for help for treatment with their addiction issues, mental health, a place to sleep. And I asked all those organizations what it would be your number one priority from that downtown table's recommendations: affordable housing. They would all say, start with affordable housing. And when I talk about affordable housing in this context, I'm talking social housing, Chris. They all say, look at the Helsinki model. So the good news for us is that Helsinki has done this. They have implemented a housing first strategy, and they measured all of the costs. That's the most important part. So we should do it because it's the right thing to do. We should house our vulnerable, those suffering from mental health and addiction. But we can also do it because the Helsinki experiment has shown us something dramatic. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars less to our healthcare, justice, emergency response systems to house people and then treat them for addiction and mental health issues than it does to try to police our way out of the situation. They also found that those that are housed are 80% more likely to recover from addiction issues. So it also reinforces the treatment of those individuals. So we got to take care of those vulnerable people. The other thing that a lot of people didn't notice in that downtown safety table report, it identified that there's about 50 individuals that are responsible for most of the social disorder in the drop-in center and other places providing housing. We can arrest those people and we can prosecute those people. Those people are preying on our most vulnerable Calgarians. They need to go to jail and they need to not be welcome in those centers and prey on young families, mothers with children who are in the drop-in center. So let's save our justice, the hard edge of our justice system for those who prey on our most vulnerable.
Okay, so there's like 30 questions I need to follow up on that statement alone. Affordable housing. Last time I checked, the city does not build housing. I don't care who you are, they do not build housing. They build the infrastructure. The province is the one who goes and sets up affordable housing and those social services. We're talking about downloading of responsibilities onto the municipality around those social issues, mental health and addiction, which is a true issue in our communities. But again, last time I checked, that's the responsibility of the province is to deal with mental health and addictions, and that's why they're downloading it onto the municipalities and giving some funding, not a lot. And then you talk about crime. Last time I checked, crime is a federal responsibility of prosecuting and keeping offenders in jail or keeping them off the streets. But there's a sort of reoccurring theme that you get caught, you get prosecuted, you stay in jail, you're out a few weeks later. How do you see yourself by going back to the basics of talking about that critical infrastructure, talking about getting back to what the municipality should be doing with what you just said, where you're going into and creeping into provincial and federal jurisdictional roles?
Listen, Chris, at the end of the day, these are issues for Calgarians. And Calgarians do not care whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal funding, and they pay all of our salaries. So let's start with we have to work together.
Yeah.
The municipal, provincial, and federal governments have to sit down and the issue like justice issues, like mental health and addiction issues, don't care if they are considered provincial jurisdictions in the Canadian Constitution. The people who are suffering just care that someone helps them. We are on the front lines as the municipal government. But yes, we absolutely have to work together with provincial and federal governments, and I will absolutely do that. I will sit down and I will work with them. Let me take you through your issues one at a time, though. City doesn't build housing. They actually do. Attainable Housing Calgary actually is a city-owned and city-backed organization. It and other organizations are tasked with building 3,000 social or affordable housing units a year, and they currently build 300. So I sat down with them and asked them what they need. The city provides about a $20 million back loan. If we doubled that loan to Attainable Housing Calgary, we could get to the 3,000 units a year we need that have been recommended to be built on affordable housing. We also have land that we can contribute as a municipality. So the city absolutely has a role to play. Do we need to work with the province? Absolutely. There are changes to the Land Titles Act, that is provincial legislation, that we should make that make it easier for organizations to build affordable housing. Another way that the city can help, when you talk to organizations like this, they get treated the same way as for-profit builders. So they show up to build cheap housing that will allow people to either rent for cheap or live, afford a home. And city admin, adds on, listen, we want you to replace all the curbs on this block and replace the pipe. Well, that's $1 million extra dollars. It's no longer affordable, right? So the city has we can remove the red tape and the bureaucracy. We can double the funding for attainable housing in Calgary, and we can help it get built.
I should clarify. I should clarify
Yeah.
by my statement that Calgary doesn't build houses. Yes, they do work with partners who build the
Yeah.
houses, but we are not hiring construction workers to go out and actually build the house that is there. We're not buying the materials, and that's what I meant. I do apologize just for clarification because I know I'm about to get nasty emails from Calgarians saying yes, they do. So there's my little clarification there, Brian.
Well, and the important thing, Chris, like you're absolutely, for those who are going to write in and give Chris a hard time, you're absolutely right that the city is not a developer, but the city, the point that you and I can agree on is the city has a very active role that we can take to facilitate housing being built. And we can work with the province to remove other barriers to housing being built. And the one thing that both the federal conservatives and the federal liberals, it might be the only issue they agree on, that we have a national housing crisis and that we need to build thousands of new homes in Calgary. So I'm convinced with the next federal government that we could work with, if that's a federally conservative elected government, we could work with them in the province on building housing. And one easy win, transit-oriented design. So people talk about that, but let me use a concrete example. Westbrook Mall, the West LRT was built under Westbrook Mall. There is a perfectly functioning, beautiful underground C train station with a parking lot above it. The developer sat on that for 10 years, and the city just bought it back. So the city owns the land above it. If we had a development plan and we were shovel ready, we could engage the federal conservatives if they win the next election, and have something ready that speaks exactly to their priorities, and put 30,000 people above a C train line 8 minutes from downtown. That would solve density right there. And if you did that right, then you could look at the Green Line. And the good news is, developers bought all the stations along the Green Line and are ready to develop transit-oriented design. The bad news is the province just broke the Green Line. So we have to get back to there's multiple reasons why the Green Line is important. Transit for Calgarians being fundamental. And by the way, for those who care about the environment, the single biggest way that you can help the environment in Calgary is transit. And it also helps people get to work, to hockey games, to the downtown core, and to Seton. It's absolutely essential, but it's also essential to a density strategy for Calgary that doesn't mean it all gets built in people's backyards where they want to preserve their neighborhood. So they're all linked, and we have to work on all of those priorities.
Going back to the original statement about mental health
Sure.
and addictions before I turn to the next subject, because I'm cautious of time and I know
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have an hour, but I want you to finish off there before I start talking about some other issues.
Sure.
So go ahead.
The only other thing I would say on crime and prosecutions being a federal issue, I mean, I am a lawyer and have worked in the justice system, and I worked with the police commission. I would really encourage people to look at, and I met with them and I toured it. There's an organization called Simon House functioning in Calgary. And what people should be aware of is that decades ago, the Crown prosecutors, the judges, and the city sat down together and they designed something called the drug court. And the drug court is an alternative sentencing model. And it takes repeat offenders and they have the opportunity to go into drug treatment at Simon House. I'll use one example. They wrote a book about it, and a movie's coming out. There's an individual named Gladu, and he was one of an early person who received that. So when he was up for sentencing in a Calgary court, the judge asked him whether he was ready for drug court, and he agreed to it. He was facing about 150 criminal charges at the time, and suffering from addiction his whole life. And he went into Simon House, was treated successfully, became a counselor at Simon House, reintegrated into society, and got married, and has had no criminal involvement since that time. John Rook, the head of Simon House, estimates that, for those that aren't moved by the story of Gladu as I am, he estimates that we saved about $1.5 million on Gladu alone, not going through the criminal justice system any longer. So the justice system has created alternatives. We can take advantage of that alternative sentencing as part of the justice system solution to mental health and addiction issues.
I want to turn to the provincial municipal relationship.
Sure.
And over the last, I would say, well, let's be honest, since 2021, the election, the relationship between the province and the municipality of Calgary has not been the friendliest. It seems like there's been a big microscope over top of what's going on at City Hall. How do you see yourself building that relationship back to a better place with Premier Danielle Smith, with the cabinet ministers, and make sure that when you're talking about provincial municipal issues, it benefits all of Calgarians together?
Yeah, listen, I know in the political arena, there's a lot of, a lot of show and a lot of, I don't know if you tell me, Chris, is it kabuki theater? There's a little bit of performance that goes on, between the province and the city. I will tell you this, I know Premier Smith. Personally, I have met with UCP ministers of tourism and industry when they are in town, to talk about what they can do better to build Calgary. And I've told them straight to their face, listen, I have ideas. You can steal them all. I just want you to win. If you are trying to attract tourism to Calgary or build a more vibrant tech industry in Calgary, which my firm does a ton of work in, I am not only cheering for them, I will help them. And we do not care who gets credit. So let's celebrate what the province is doing right. And those are two areas I think they do a pretty good job on. But
But
we
will you
also,
be able to stand up and say, I need to call a spade, and this is just not going to work for Calgary?
I not only can I, but I have. So I have, listen, when I was chair of the police commission, I also, people don't know this, but you also work with the justice minister as well as city council. And I worked with both conservative and NDP justice ministers. I spoke frankly to them and spoke to both governments about what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong. On the Green Line, I will call a spade. Minister Dreeshen's out of his depth. He is not, he killed a deal. It's going to cost us tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And, he was throwing out in the weeks after he killed that deal suggestions that had all been studied in 5 previous studies that he clearly hadn't read. So calling a spade, the premier needs to step in and take a serious interest in the Green Line in Calgary. I will tell them that privately and I'll say it publicly. My number one priority is to negotiate on behalf of Calgarians. And circling back to one of the first issues we talked about tax dollars, I can tell you if I'm elected mayor, when the next provincial election happens in 3 years and the UCP and the NDP are in Calgary because the election will be decided in Calgary, I won't be standing next to the premier in a Flames jersey to announce a deal that she did. I will ask them for one thing. 1/3 of Calgary property tax dollars every year go to Edmonton and we don't get it back. I would like the province is running a multi-billion dollar surplus. It has multiple sources of revenue, income, tax, royalties, and yet every year they pick Calgarians' pockets for 1/3 of their property tax dollars. I think the entry level issue in the next provincial election in Calgary should be, can we keep our property tax in Calgary to be spent on Calgarians? And if I'm mayor, I will absolutely make sure that is the only issue they hear from me so that we can fund the priorities of Calgarians.
Brian, you're speaking my love language right now, and I need to play in
Okay.
this field right now because the province will say, well, we collect taxes from Airdrie, we collect taxes from Rocky Mountain House, and they go into Calgary as well. So, can they have some of their money back? So, what do you say? Is it just what is collected from the province from each municipality should go back to their respective municipality, and that's it? Or are we not all in this together? Because the
We're,
flip side of that is people down in Ward 13 or Ward 11 will say, well, my tax dollars are going to a green line that I will never use, that I will never utilize. So, how do you balance the two opposing challenges there? Because what you're asking the province is what residents will be asking you if you're mayor.
So listen, the province, setting aside the billions in royalties that are generated by businesses in Calgary every year for the province funds, I'm pretty sure Calgary's overcontributed. But setting that aside, on the property tax issue, um, uh, income tax is what the province collects. It gets its income tax from all Albertans, and it's running a multi-billion dollar surplus. So it absolutely has the funds from income tax and royalty payments coming from all Albertans to be invested in all of Alberta. A property tax is literally tied to the geographic location. And most Calgarians are unaware that 1/3 of our property tax goes to the province. And I'm pretty sure our share of property tax is higher than Airdrie's. But check my facts on that. I think we're over contributing. So I absolutely listen. Yes, we're all in this together, but we are talking about a specific tax that is the sole source of revenue for Calgarians, and Calgarians have an affordability crisis, and we just talked about. We have to rebuild the water main. We have downtown safety to address. We have to fix the housing issue, fix our potholes. That's going to take money. And if we had that 1/3 of property tax dollars, we wouldn't have to raise property tax every year.
Would you like to see the province give back more in the GPOT funding, the grants in place of taxes funding, because they don't pay property taxes for all their many provincially owned buildings that they have, and the city is out money that you're paying for snow removal, infrastructure, waters, treatments that go into those provincially owned buildings.
I absolutely think that's on the table for a renegotiated, either city charter or financial deal with the province. But you know, for too many years, the federal and provincial governments have pushed down responsibility on municipalities without corresponding funding. That needs to end. And I will say, what I don't like, I find it bizarre that this premier spends a lot of time fighting with Ottawa about them being in her backyard on jurisdiction, and then treats municipalities like they're not I get constitutionally they are a creature of provincial statute. But these people are elected by the wards in Calgary to represent Calgarians. They are the closest on the ground, and they're dealing with the everyday issues of taking out the garbage, fixing the potholes, and they deserve the respect of the provincial government to take actions there on behalf of Calgarians. And it's only the same level of respect that the premier would demand of the prime minister.
I want to turn to my last subject, and it's going to be a few questions, then we'll wrap up here, Brian. And
Sure.
I am going to hazard a guess that you already know this, that if you were elected in October 2025 and you make decisions based on what you're hearing and but based on what you feedback you get from Calgarians, you understand that not 100% of the people are going to be in favor of your decisions. They will never be fully committed to a Thiessen government.
Agreed.
How do you make decisions with the understanding that not everyone's going to agree with you. Because I listened to an interview with you that you did about 10 years ago prior to this
Mm.
interview, and you said, my key success factor is emotional intelligence and empathy. How do you bring that into a municipal realm when empathy and emotional intelligence might not always be the best when you're looking at dollars and cents?
Oh, I listen, I absolutely believe EQ and empathy are critical to my success as a negotiator. In the
But you're going to
listen,
be negotiating some very big challenges that lay ahead for this city.
as I do every day in my day job for 30 years, and some of the most bet the farm issues for large multi-billion dollar corporations, I am comfortable. Listen, let me use a concrete example. When I was chair of the Calgary Police Commission, I sat down and hammered through 4 consecutive budgets with the Calgary Police Service. The commission had civilian oversight. People don't realize this, but we actually approve the Calgary Police budget. And then I had to turn around and sit down with every one of the city councilors and the mayor and convince them on our budget. And every single one of the budgets, once I went through the difficult process with the Calgary Police Service senior leadership, which took a lot of hammering out, everyone was passed by city council because I spent the time, I sat down in their offices, I talked to them about what their priorities were, what they weren't. And I can tell you that Jeremy Farkas and Drew Farrell had a very different idea about what police budgets should look like. And I got every single one of those budgets approved because of EQ and emotional intelligence, an ability to sit in a room and understand what people's priorities are. If you don't think good negotiators have to tap into those resources, I would say that's a mistake. Some of the best that I've ever worked with, the number one thing they do is understand the room, understand the priorities, speak the language of your adversary, and it's going to be critically important. Whether you have a UCP or an NDP provincial government, a liberal or a conservative federal government, you have to understand what their priorities are. If Premier Smith's priority is drug treatment, then we have to speak the language of drug treatment and understand that that has to be part of any solution. So that's an example of understanding the person you're in the room with, what their priorities are, and how you can deliver that as a solution as you get the things that are important to, in this case, my clients, which are Calgarians who come first.
One of the big criticisms of this council is Calgarians aren't being listened to. We talk about housing. We just saw the rezoning challenges. We talk about the budget. They just passed their budget, and I think it's about 3.9 to 3.6% tax increase, depending on what type of house you have for tax increase. How do you plan to listen to Calgarians, understanding that you're not going to please everyone, but you're going to have to make some tough decisions?
Yeah, it's I think a good example of that is the budget choice exercise that we have online right now. And so, as opposed to picking a promise out of the air like 0% property tax increase, we actually have gone out, we've simplified a very complicated municipal budget process, put it online to ask Calgarians. Everyone will say, including me, if you ask me, I'd like to pay no tax. Absolutely. That would be I'm not a lunatic. I like to keep my money in my pocket. But when we ask the much more sophisticated process, and as you go through our budget exercise, like, hey, do you want a 2% increase for police? Or would you like 0% tax? And you have to make a series of choices on where you're going to cut and where you're going to increase. That gets you a much more sophisticated answer from Calgarians and gives us a much better understanding of what their priorities are. So I'm really excited as we go through this to get the results from Calgarians, starting at the same point. None of us want a property tax increase, but when you have to choose between these priorities, how much are you willing to accept? And you can go through the exercise and you end up with a 10% property tax increase and go, oh, okay, that's not on. What am I going to dial back? So we're trying to start with listening to Calgarians, hearing what their priorities are, including given a choice between fire, EMS, and police and a 0% property tax, which do you choose? And I suspect, Chris, Calgarians are pretty sophisticated. I suspect as they go through that exercise, they'll say, okay, I'm willing to accept a certain amount in return for these critical services, but you have to invest in these priorities. But I'm waiting. So I'm starting with listening, Chris, as opposed to lecturing or throwing out ideas like a 0% property tax increase, because you don't know what emergencies come up in addition to all that. So you have to be prepared. So I'm starting with that process. But Chris, no one will ever agree with everything that you do. And listen, this isn't a career for me. Unlike many of the people that are running again who seem to have made it a career choice to be a career politician, I have had a long and successful career. I want to give back. I want to serve a couple terms, as you do. As I always say, when I've chaired the police commission or boards of directors that I've served as chair of, if Calgarians decide to elect me, you are privileged with a brief period to serve. You move the ball forward on the priorities that we've outlined. You will not be successful in everything that you try, but you can dramatically move the ball forward. And the beautiful thing about municipal politics is most of the things we do right, like actually inspecting critical infrastructure, actually building housing, will be ribbon cuttings for the next council and the next mayor. So it's a service. And if you go into it with the mindset of you're not going to please everyone, there's some sleeves to be rolled up and some hard work to be done, and that's the reward, I think you're going to be okay.
Second last question for you, Brian, and it's an important one because you have morals, I believe. You have
Yes.
beliefs in what you think is right and what is wrong.
Hmm.
Your morals and beliefs may sometimes come in contradiction of what Calgarian voters want. Who wins in
Hmm.
that situation, in your opinion? Because they've elected you to lead. You have your platform, but you have to make the tough decisions and you have to be the one that casts the votes. If you hear a majority, and I hate to say majority because we all know there's an apathy in this city, that
Hmm.
even the majority of people who showed up, that's still not a majority of Calgarians who showed up to the rezoning challenge, the rezoning issue, open forum. Who wins in that internal battle in Brian? Is it the voters or is it Brian himself?
Well, listen, the voters elect us and we serve the voters. So we have to answer the voters to the voters ultimately. I do have a strong moral compass that I follow and guides me on issues like this. But you use the zoning example. Okay, what was the majority on that issue? There were two public sessions. In the first one, the vast majority of people who showed up spoke in favor of open zoning, and then certain councillors went up and whipped up their constituents and pitted Calgarians against each other. And the majority of people that showed up to the second session were against open zoning.
So just on that note alone, I will
Yeah.
say who the true majority there. The majority was the apathetic Calgarian.
Yes, yeah, true. But here's what I'll say. Like on so an issue like that, when you say I will listen to the majority of Calgarians, if the majority of Calgarians are, in your words, apathetic to that issue, and then vocal minorities are speaking out, then I think you do turn to both your campaign promise to Calgarians and your moral compass. And when I look at housing, like, listen, let's reduce red tape. Let's get more housing built. Let's remove process so we can build more housing. But I heard a lot of Calgarians expressing real deep concern for their neighborhoods, and we have to respect those neighborhoods. So zoning is one small tool in the toolbox on a much bigger issue, and that is a housing crisis nationally and in Calgary. So you try it as a tool, and you go back to Calgarians and ask them how it's working. And if it's not working, you try to fix it. And if it can't be fixed, you try one of the 10 other tools we can use to build housing. And I would just, for those that that are deeply concerned for their neighborhoods, I absolutely, again, emphasize we have to respect that. These are huge investments for Calgarians. Those concerns are incredibly valid. And but we had an 8-year debate in Calgary on secondary suites. And if you go back to that debate, I will tell you the sky was falling. The city would end if we allowed secondary suites. And I think we can all agree it has not destroyed the fabric of Calgary. I know certain people have thrown gasoline on the fire on this zoning issue. It is a solvable issue, and we can move on to what's needed to build more housing in Calgary. And we absolutely can address people's concerns on zoning. It is not end of days, and we do not need to make this an issue that divides us as we try to solve the housing crisis.
My last question, and I appreciate you taking more time than I asked for, but we got into a pretty good
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
there.
We got deep in.
What's Before I let you go, what's the one thing you want Calgarians to know as we head in? Because this is December 2024. We're recording this. Literally January 1st is the unofficial official kickoff to Calgary Votes 2025, ending in October of 2025. So what's the one message that you have for Calgarians about the next 10 months and how the Calgary Party will be focusing their attention?
The Calgary Party is dedicated to moving forward on the priorities of downtown safety, housing, transit, and critical infrastructure. We have a plan. We are well organized to execute on that plan. I hear every day from Calgarians who are deeply unsatisfied with this council and want to see a council that can work together and ask why we can't do better than the options that were available in the last election. So I'd say to Calgarians, help is on the way. We are a group of fresh perspective. I don't come from politics. We have the interests of our neighbors and our friends and Calgarians in mind. We have a plan to address the concerns of Calgarians. We have a different approach than what has been happening in the last 3 years at City Council. So help is on the way.
Brian, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me. For our listeners and our viewers, if you want to learn more about the Calgary Party and Brian himself, the link's in the show notes below. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check it out below. If you're listening to this on audio streams, check out the show notes. They're there. All the links to the websites and the LinkedIn's and the social medias are there. So highly recommend it. Brian, much appreciated. And I'm assuming this is not our last conversation we'll have between now and October, but it's a great first one. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, let's keep talking. You can see how I'm doing.
Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs Calgary Votes 2025. If you are a candidate or a prospective candidate thinking about running for this upcoming 2025 Calgary elections, reach out to us so we can have you on the show to get your message out there. We want to sit down with as many candidates running for all mayor and councillor positions over the next 10 months. So until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode in a few days. Talk soon, everyone.